Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nicole Atkins, and I'm the CEO here at Unique. And we're excited to share today's presentation with you because it touches on an issue that's important to you and to us, and that issue is resource equity. I'm joined today by Josh Neisler, Senior Library Consultant, and Kevin Kernan, Marketing Specialist. Josh will be leading today's presentation, and Kevin will be monitoring the chat for your questions and facilitating the Q&A towards the end of the session. We're also excited to be joined by Katie Murtha from Lincoln City Library in Lincoln, Nebraska, who will be sharing her perspective on today's topic from her vantage point as a library leader in just a few moments. If you have any questions while Josh is sharing, please feel free to type those in the Q&A session, and we'll answer as many of those questions as we can later on. Once again, thanks for joining us. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Josh.
Thanks, Nicole. Hello, everyone. It's good to have you with us today. For those of you who were with us last time, welcome back. We're glad you could join us. As you probably know, what we do here at Unique is help libraries assess and optimize all of their different communication channels with patrons. It's really true that all great relationships are built on strong communication. And our end-to-end suite of patron communication solutions is designed to help you with exactly that, to help folks sign up for a library card, access library resources, stay informed on their account, as well as what's happening at the library, get help when they need it, stay eligible for borrowing, and automatically renew their borrowing privileges so they can continue accessing library resources without any type of interruption. What I want to share today is an insight that comes from our unique vantage point in the library world as a trusted communications partner with an extensive footprint in the industry. First, I'm going to briefly recap the original goal of Fine Free, then share a gap in how Fine Free actually works from an execution standpoint in many libraries that you may already be aware of, or at least have an inkling might be happening in your library. Then I want to talk about how that gap impacts the overall goal of Fine Free that we're trying to achieve together, and how Unique can help to close that gap. And then I'll turn and have a brief conversation with our special guest, Katie Murtha from Lincoln Libraries, to get her perspective on this topic as a library leader. And then finally, as Nicole touched on, we'll conclude with a few minutes of Q&A near the end of our time together. So let's just jump right in. To understand where we are today, we have to start with the original why. The heart behind the Fine Free movement was and is to provide not just equal, but truly equitable access to library resources. For decades, daily late fines were the standard tool that libraries used to incentivize returns. But over time, the industry realized that fines were creating a regressive barrier for many patrons. So like a $10 or $20 fine might be a minor inconvenience to an affluent patron, just slightly annoying. But to a financially disadvantaged family, that same fine could mean a blocked account and a total loss of library access indefinitely. So by eliminating daily late fines, libraries were able to welcome folks back, remove the stress and shame around accumulated fines, and level the playing field so that everyone in the community, whatever their economic status, could benefit from the collection. And that was a massive step forward for the values that we share as an industry. But as many of you who are managing collections day to day know, years removed from those initial policy changes, we're seeing a significant gap between the original intent of Fine Free and the actual real life outcome. In the vast majority of libraries, the patron notification sequence has a stopping point. There comes a time where you're no longer actively reaching out to bring back that patron and the items they're holding. Maybe they'll come back on their own eventually, but you don't know for sure. And you don't really have any mechanism at your disposal or lever that you can pull to make that outcome more likely. And just to illustrate the point, if you look at the slide on your screen right now, we've mapped out a pretty standard lending life cycle. A patron checks out an item, maybe they utilize a renewal period or two, they get a friendly due date reminder, some overdue notices, maybe a final notice, and ultimately a bill. It's a very logical, structured, scheduled out flow. But look at what happens immediately after that bill goes out. There's a block on the graphic here that says end of communication. And this is exactly the operational gap we want to talk about today. In the vast majority of libraries, the automated notifications do stop. The library reaches a point where they stop contacting the patron altogether. And at that point where the communication breaks down, the patron often permanently exits the library and the materials are written off as lost for good. So the unintended consequence here is that we lose touch with the patron holding the item. We risk losing the material permanently as well, and we directly impact every other patron who would benefit from that resource. And to put a finer point on these impacts, and to add a couple more that are internally facing for the library, first, the patron holding the items often exits. When the library's communication process ends, we lose the opportunity to reactivate that patron, to take the initiative to restore their eligibility and get them borrowing again. And from a practical perspective, once the notices run their course, we're essentially allowing that patron to quietly quit the library. And then second, the materials are lost. When an item sits on a shelf or in a drawer or the back seat of a car for 60 or 90 days, the likelihood of those items ever coming back to the library really falls off a cliff. And then third, and this is the piece that directly undercuts equity, you have the impact on other patrons. When a high demand or high impact item is taken out of circulation, the front door to access swings closed, whether that's in the form of waiting for a long time in the hold queue or not having the opportunity to seek out or discover that item in the future. And then fourth, your material selectors are put in a bind every week, having to make hard choices around spending your materials budget to repurchase titles and maintain reasonable hold ratios, or diversify the collection with new titles. And then finally, frontline staff have to deal with hard questions and customer frustration about material availability and may find themselves doing kind of fruitless shelf checks that leave patrons disappointed, which can create sort of an air or a vibe of unnecessary negativity. And we don't actually have to guess that this is happening. We can see it in real time in public catalogs across the country. If you look at this snapshot from a major urban library system, they have a total of 160 Wi-Fi hotspot devices in their collection. Online, it says available, which sets an expectation with the patron that these items are there and ready for them to use. But in reality, only 3 units are actually sitting on a shelf, while 171 patrons are actively on hold waiting for one of those units. And by the way, I grabbed this screenshot yesterday, but when I first found it last month, as I was preparing for today's session, there were actually 207 hotspots. So since last month, 47 units have been lost, damaged, or otherwise taken out of circulation. And when you look at patron comments in that same catalog, the frustration is clear. Folks are actually commenting on this item record that they've been waiting over 5 months for a hotspot. They're using words like incompetence to describe the wait times. Um, uh, and fair or not, as bad as it is to have those types of complaints posted on your website for everybody to see, it's even worse for your frontline staff to have to deal with those types of comments in person. But what this tells us is that when a fine-free policy isn't supported and supplemented by a structured process to carry forward the outreach and reactivate the patron and the items they're holding, over time, a ghost catalog develops that promises resources that it can't actually deliver. Wait times can stretch out, especially on items that are both high demand and high cost, meaning you don't have as much flexibility to replace them at will. And patrons can become exasperated, as you see here. And ultimately, the goal of fine free is undermined to some degree, unintentionally, but substantially. And by the way, that first comment you see on your screen, the rest of it says, this is ridiculous, tedious, incompetent, asinine. So pretty tough words, and definitely not the reputation any library wants to develop with its patrons. So, to recap quickly, paradoxically, a policy designed to maximize equity can unwittingly create an unintentional but substantial inequity. So just think about who's sitting at position number 150 on that wait list for a hotspot. Maybe it's a student who doesn't have reliable internet at home, trying to finish an assignment, or a job seeker trying to create a resume or submit employment applications. If one patron keeps a hotspot for 3 months past its due date, even though it gets turned off long before that, and the library's notices run their course and stop, we're unintentionally prioritizing the one patron holding the item over the rest of the community's right to access, and we're losing the patron and their item anyway. And the patrons who suffer the most are the vulnerable populations who rely on the library as their primary or sole access point for crucial resources. Without a structured process to effectively activate the patron and the item, we have a kind of resource bottleneck that unintentionally restricts access rather than expanding it for all. So how does Gentle Nudge help our library partners close this gap? Well, basically, we just pick up where the library's communication process leaves off. We seamlessly step into that end of communication gap and try to keep the conversation going. And you have total say, by the way, on the thresholds at which accounts are referred to unique in terms of the dollars that have been billed and how many days after the bill an account is sent to unique for extended follow-up. And at that point, instead of letting a bill be your final word to the patron, within days, our Gentle Nudge process begins, which is a structured sequence of letters and phone calls that are calibrated to center the dignity of the patron and really uphold that, and at the same time, reactivate them and the materials that they're holding. We also, by the way, check for the patron's current mailing address before starting our sequence to give us and you the best chance of successfully contacting them. So the effect isn't to introduce friction or change values. but just simply to provide extended, structured outreach over a longer timeline than your ILS and your library are set up to handle. And I want to contextualize exactly what we're talking about here, because a common concern that we hear from libraries that are evaluating our Gentle Nudge service is that it will affect a large percentage of their patrons. But the data that we've accumulated over the years actually tells us the exact opposite. Across all the libraries we've served over the years, on average, 1 to 2% of library patrons interact with our service per year. Now, in raw numbers, that can be thousands of patrons and even more items. But at the same time, the vast majority of your community doesn't even know Unique exists and will never come in contact with our service. But for that percentage who do drift past the billing notice stage without taking action, Gentle Nudge serves as a compassionate safety net that reactivates them and the materials they're holding. And when you implement a structured, gentle material recovery process, everyone benefits, because by design, it solves the friction points for every stakeholder group involved in the life cycle of a library loan. For the patron holding the items, it provides clarity on next steps without shame and tells them exactly how to restore their eligibility. For patrons waiting for the items, or those who would discover and use them in the future, wait times drop and timely access to helpful or even crucial resources is restored. For frontline staff, one of the great wins of going fine-free is that it reduced those uncomfortable conversations at the desk over fines and fees. But it does create a different kind of friction that I touched on a moment ago in the form of customer disappointment and manual shelf checking that Gentle Nudge helps to further reduce. And then in terms of collection development, Gentle Nudge helps protect your purchasing power so your budget goes toward evolving the collection instead of just treading water. And we do that by alleviating the dynamic where when high demand items stay out, selectors either have to buy more copies to keep the hold ratio reasonable, or for items or devices where you just can't buy more, letting that ratio kind of unravel and really get out of whack. Now, when we talk about Gentle Nudge functioning as a complement or extension of the library's communication process, there are a few common myths that tend to pop up in our conversations with libraries that I want to take just a moment to address and dispel. And the first myth is that using a recovery service will scare patrons away. But in reality, we see that the opposite is true. When a patron receives a clear, non-threatening reminder, it actually removes the shame barrier. It gives them clear direction on next steps and really invites them back to the library to become an active borrower again. And then the second myth is that patrons will have their credit scores impacted or they'll be reported to credit bureaus. And on this point, I want to be just unequivocally clear and say that Unique does not credit report. So there's zero impact on a patron's credit score and no legal threats. Even if a library asked us to credit report, at this point in time, we couldn't do that. Our workflow is simply an extension of your own library's communication stream. Secondary outreach cadence designed to reactivate the patron, reactivate the materials, and not to harm a patron's financial future in any way. And then a third myth is that patrons are going to be pressured to pay Unique. And this also is a misunderstanding of how our process functions. Unique doesn't actually collect money from patrons, nor do we take any type of commission on what we help recover for our library partners. If an item can't be found and a replacement fee does have to be handled, patrons just pay the library directly, and we provide them clear instructions on how to go about doing that. Our staff and our communications simply direct the patron back to your service desk or to your online catalog portal to clear their account and restore their eligibility. The library maintains at all times through the process total control over the financial relationship with the patron and has the final say all along the way. And again, the intent and design of our gentle nudge service is to provide a restorative process, not a punitive one. We're just trying to facilitate basically a reunion between the library and the patron, and to realize the intended purpose of Fine Free and ensure that Fine Free is sustainable over the long term. Now, for additional perspective on this from a library's point of view, I'd like to spend the next few minutes in conversation with Katie Murtha from Lincoln Libraries in Lincoln, Nebraska. LCL is a long-time customer of Unique. They went Fine Free in 2022 and published an interesting report 1 year later summarizing the impact of Fine Free that they were seeing and looking at that impact in terms of circulation, hold ratios, overdues, and other metrics, as well as the role and impact of Unique's gentle nudge service in their process. So I wanted to take the opportunity to chat with Katie for a few minutes on that and the thought process of keeping gentle nudge in the equation as they made the transition to Fine Free. So Katie, thank you for joining us first and foremost. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in libraries before I pepper you with a few more questions?
Sure. Well, I was an accountant when I came out of college in my 20s and decided I really didn't want to spend time doing that. I went back to library school when my youngest child was in kindergarten. And so I worked in public services for about 10 years. And then for the last 7 years, I've been in support services. And so part of what I do in support services is I work with the ILS aspect of circulation. And so working with accounts like this is something that I do deal with quite a bit. And I do want to point out, we actually had a two-step Fine Free process. So in 2019, we went Fine Free for youth materials only, and then used that information to kind of justify going Fine Free for all of our materials in 2022.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And then kind of thinking back to that time when you were making the case and making the leap to Fine Free, curious why did you all decide to keep Unique in the picture? You'd been customers of and using our gentle nudge service before that, but why did you keep Unique in the picture when you made that decision to go Fine Free? And can you tell us a little bit about the thought process there?
Sure. So we've really never really considered dropping Unique. We kind of looked at it as a cost versus benefit, and we always saw that there was a benefit to having Unique as a part of our process. We wondered when we went Fine Free if we would actually have an increase in delinquent accounts, and we thought we definitely need Unique at that point, but our experience really has been it was very similar to the number of customers prior to going Fine Free that are still it's been very steady, and it's was something we never really considered dropping.
Gotcha. So you've seen since making that transition that the number of patrons whose accounts are referred over to Unique for additional follow-up has stayed about level to what it was, say in pre-COVID times. If we just
Right.
look back and forget the COVID years, in those years prior to COVID when things were normal, it's been about level with that 2018, 2019 period.
Yes, that's exactly what we saw. We weren't quite sure what we were going to expect. When we went fine free for youth materials in 2019, we weren't thinking of everything we needed to track to really have good statistics. And then we got hit with COVID. So we didn't have a lot of, I think, really valuable statistics to use when we made the case for going fine free completely in 2022. But looking at our pre-COVID years and where we are now, it's roughly about the same.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, those COVID years were outliers to say the least for all of us, I think. Yeah. Do you recall at what threshold do you all refer accounts over to Unique for follow-up?
So we're looking at accounts that have more than a $50 or more balance for more than 3 weeks. And those are the ones that get sent over. And so we're kind of looking at like the last 12 months. It's about, we're spending about $14,000 for this service. And we've recovered about 19,000 in cash. But more importantly, we've recovered about $143,000 of materials. And at the end of the day, that's what we really want, is our materials to come back.
Okay.
So for us, I mean, the costs definitely, or the benefits definitely outweigh any cost. It's really been good for us.
Yeah. Okay, great. So if my math is right, and I'm doing math in public here, which is risky, that's about $159,000 in recovery between the materials and the cash. And but what percentage of your patrons have been coming in contact with Unique service per year on average?
So it's really low. It's about 1%. So roughly about 1,300, and we have like registered borrowers of probably 170, but 170,000, but about 40,000 are. It was called Connect Ed when the program first started, but they're Lincoln Public School students. So there's a big duplication. They both get a Connect Ed card and they get a regular LCL card. So really, if you kind of take those out of the equation, it's about 130,000. So it's about 1% of our customers.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, we've talked about the numbers, but in terms of the results, that Lincoln Libraries have been getting from Gentle Nudge, what has been the experience since going fine free? I saw an interesting note on this in the report that we mentioned a moment ago.
Yeah. So, the number of accounts that are submitted for collection or recovery are about the same. We are seeing that the monetary amount, the dollar amount for those accounts is a lot lower. So you're taking the fines out of that. So we're only really recovering at this point damaged and lost materials. And we've had several anecdotal conversations reported to us where our frontline staff, have told people that, well, the items are lost, and the people will say, oh, no, they're not lost. They're sitting on my desk, or they're in my bedroom or something. And it's like, well, they're lost to us because they didn't come back. And if we can get through that, then they'll return them. And then in terms of the value of the items that have been returned, it's a lot higher. So it's really been a positive process for us.
Okay, awesome. And then that report, after a year of being fine free, mentioned that it's a cost-saving measure in staff time, in addition to being effective at attempting to recoup materials, reactivate patrons. So can you speak to that staff time element just a little bit?
Sure. Well, for the most part, it's eliminated a lot of really negative conversations. Not having to deal with fines. We've had customers who are concerned when they first get a letter, and then when we explain to them that it's not being credit reported, they calm down quite a bit. And it's allowed us to focus on getting the materials back. It's fostered a lot of goodwill, I think, with our customers, just not having those negative conversations. So our frontline staff don't have to deal with that in the way that they had before.
That's great. And not to toot our own horn too much, but I think that speaks to the clarity element that I was providing, like that I was mentioning, like that the communications that Unique sends on behalf of our partner libraries does help clarify next steps for patrons, so they know exactly what they need to do in terms of returning their items and then restoring their own eligibility to continue borrowing. And then when they go into the library and they don't have to have like a fraught conversation with a staff member, they just take care of it. They know exactly what the process is going to be. I think that helps kind of solidify that they're being welcomed back. They're not on the naughty list. It's just a matter of kind of clearing this one little hurdle up and then moving forward. And they're much more inclined at that point. So like once they take care of their business at the desk, I bet in many cases just wander into the stacks and find the next item they can borrow now that their privileges have been restored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can also use the self-checks without having to come to the desk and have a conversation.
Oh, don't even have to have a conversation, even better. Yeah. That's awesome. And you were telling me the other day, Katie, when we were chatting, that you all also have a sort of like a free pass policy. And I thought maybe other libraries would be helped by hearing a little bit about how that works.
Okay, so we have a Fresh Start waiver program. It allows a customer a once in a lifetime waiver of up to $200 of library fees. So we really do encourage customers to use it for large amounts. If something happens, say, they had their car broken into and all of their library books were stolen, they're still out on their account, they're still responsible for it, those types of things, rather than just, spilling water on a $5 paperback. Because it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We do keep track of that. So once you use it, you can't use it again. But that has helped too with our conversations with customers, if they're concerned, or if they're angry or upset over any kind of fee on their account. And that was approved by our library board. We've had a longstanding policy of that. And anything beyond that has to go to our library director, but we really don't do much beyond that. That Fresh Start waiver is what we call it.
Gotcha. And they can't use a portion of that. It's an all or nothing thing. So
right. Once they use it, it's done.
Gotcha. Okay. That's helpful. And I'm sure that helps alleviate some of the pressure on the frontline team who are handling those types of interactions when they see that a balance might be a good candidate for that one-time waiver to offer that. Mm-hmm. And hopefully that's a win for all concerned. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we've touched on this a little bit, but just one final question would be, how do you all there at Lincoln view the Gentle Nudge service in terms of its compatibility with a fines-free approach? Because as we were talking the other day, when you first went fines-free, some patrons kind of misunderstood what that was about and thought it was like sort of a blank check to hold items as long as they wanted. And similarly, we've seen at Unique that some libraries that go fine-free feel maybe they don't need Gentle Nudge anymore. And it's a similar misapprehension that there's no sort of kind of reciprocity, to a patron's relationship with the library. So maybe, just share with us like how you all are thinking about Gentle Nudge in terms of how it works alongside fine-free.
Well, it was definitely really helpful when we first went to fine-free, because like I said, we tried to be very clear in our communications of what fine-free meant. It's overdue fines, but if items did not come back to the library or if items came back damaged, you were going to get charged a fee. And as much as we tried to be clear with that, I think there were a large amount of people who kind of felt like it was like an open-ended checkout period. And it wasn't until they got that letter, that said, this is the amount you owe. And like I said earlier, the people who are like, no, it's not lost. It's sitting on my desk or whatever. But since it didn't come back to the libraries, it was lost to us. And so that's been really, really helpful for us to have that extra step. It's for us, we want to be good stewards of the city's money, our taxpayers' money, and getting our materials to come back is really important to us. And so this gentle nudge is definitely, we see kind of as in being in partnership with that to help get materials returned. We don't necessarily want to charge customers. We just want our materials back.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, Katie, this has been helpful. Any other thoughts or perspective you'd like to share with your gathered colleagues here on today's session?
We had, initially when we went fine free for youth materials, especially in more affluent areas, I would hear like, well, this isn't helping our children learn responsibility. You would hear a lot of different things, but we really didn't have that much pushback. It was so beneficial for people who were kind of in having a really difficult time paying bills. We had 2 library branches that were opened at the same time. They were identical buildings. One was in a very affluent area of town, one was in a lesser affluent area. And we could see right away the difference in circulation stats. And anecdotally, we heard from the branch that was in a less affluent area where parents would be saying, you could only check out 1 or 2 items because they didn't want to have to pay any overdue fees, where in the very affluent area, it didn't matter. I mean, the checkout, the circulation statistics are so much higher in that area. But when you look at who attends library programs, especially during the summer reading, the area in the less affluent area has a higher number of people attending programs. So the library usage is I think kind of the same, but we can see the difference in the circulation statistics. So eliminating those barriers for people who are less affluent really, really helped bring them back. We had a lot more people re-registering for cards, and they were coming back to the libraries, and it was really, beneficial for everybody.
Okay, that's great. Katie, thank you for the conversation. We're gonna pivot into our Q&A time now. Spend a few minutes answering any questions that have been shared. Katie's gonna stay with us. So if you have a question for myself or for Katie, and you haven't already, feel free to type that into the Q&A. And I'll invite Kevin in to kind of facilitate this portion of the session.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. We actually have a few for you, Katie. The first one is from Jessica Dyer at Tinley Park, and her question is, actually we got a couple from Jessica. The first one is, have patrons thought that calls or mail from Unique were spam? If it were me, I might be wary of a scam.
I have not heard that, although I should say that I'm not the client contact for Unique, so that would probably go to our head of our public services. But for the most part, when we see people bringing in like the letters, and they start asking frontline staff, that kind of begins the conversation. So like most people who see something like that assume that you're being credit reported, and they get very anxious about it. And then as soon as we talk to them and say, no, this is not going to be credit reported, you can see just like they just calm down, their whole demeanor calms down. In terms of spam, I'm not too, I don't have any information on that. Josh, right, would you have that at all, or do you? I don't know how. If there's any way that you can tell if people are blocking your accounts or.
Yeah, it's obviously a fair question in today's world where we all do get a variety of kind of unsolicited communications via email, via text message, and via phone. We do our best to keep all of the communication channels that we use for our gentle nudge process whitelisted with providers to give us the best opportunity to get through to patrons. So we do not hear a lot of reports back that there was a concern that that the communication was spam or anything other than legitimate. And I guess this plays into a related question, actually, that Jessica also asked, and that is like the sort of proof that our communications are successfully reaching patrons and driving a response from them is that we see a pretty high success rate. And while Jessica, the percentage of like successful reactivations can vary a lot per library based on a lot of variables, what we do see like on aggregate is that on average libraries see a 4-to-1 return on investment, meaning our library partners on average across all thresholds and timelines on which they refer accounts over to Unique will recover $4 worth of materials or fees for every dollar they spend with us on the Gentle Nudge service.
All right, thank you for that. And we got a very basic question here from Linda Anderson for you, Katie. What is your service population at Lincoln?
So we're the city of Lincoln and also the surrounding county of Lancaster. It's about 390,000 for the entire county. And of that, I would say our registered borrowers are right about 170,000. And in terms of active borrowers, and we consider active within the last year, it's about 90,000.
Awesome, thank you. Josh, we got one for you from Eli Washburn, joining us from north of the border. Hi there. How does the gentle nudge method differ from the staff phone calls and notifications that the library is making to try and contact these delinquent patrons?
Yeah, great question. So where a library does have like an extended outreach cadence that they're undertaking to try to reach the patron and reactivate them and recover the materials, first, we applaud that additional effort. Many libraries don't undertake like any type of extended process beyond the kind of automated notification sequence. Where our process differs is in a couple of respects. It can extend on a longer timeline, and then it's sequenced such that the prior attempt at communication governs or dictates the next step of communication. So we're able to make several attempts to reach them by phone. We're able to get their current mailing address before we mail them information. And all of that is structured. So on our end, it's all kind of automated the way that communication sequence works. So we're not like making notes in the ILS or keeping track of outreach attempts in a spreadsheet. So it's structured. We do this at scale. So we do it very efficiently compared to like staff time that you might invest in that. So the cost of the service per account submitted is much less than having staff actually spend time making those calls and maybe manually mailing some letters and those types of things. So it's very structured. We do this at a high level in terms of volume, and then we do it very efficiently and pass those savings back to you. The structure that of the pricing for a service like this, not to give you a sales pitch, because that's not what we're here for, but the pricing is a flat fee per account that you submit to us. So when we talk about that 4-to-1 ROI, maybe you're recovering $40 worth of materials and or fees against a $9 or $10 submission fee that Unique would charge to the library. So it's just a fixed fee for the whole communication process. Typically, patrons do respond early in the process because most folks that are referred to us for follow-up are just well-meaning, busy folks, right? Like it just keeps slipping off the to-do list, and they just need that little extra nudge to kind of like inspire some action on their part. So I hope that answers the question, but we kind of pick up where the automated notifications leave off, and then that sort of second stretch of communication we handle very, very efficiently for you. And I will say, like, it does help at the end of the day inspire action that it's like a third party that's making this this outreach to the patron to sort of kind of get their attention, give them clear direction, and get them linked up back with the library.
All right, thank you. I hope that answered your question. Yep, Eli, you're welcome. Yeah, one last call. If anybody has any more questions, pop them into the Q&A or in the chat if you like. One more for Katie. Has your staff been more efficient with their time since going to fines free, and is there less waiving or forgiving times taken?
And this would probably be anecdotal because I don't think we have any clear statistics on this, but I would say yes. Not having negative conversations with customers about why they can't check out was always kind of difficult. I worked in public service for many years, and I was at the receiving end of somebody who was just absolutely irate. He had gone to one branch to pay off his fees, and they'd forgotten to well, he had materials that were overdue. They didn't check those in, so the fees weren't put onto his account. And he paid the balance before those materials were checked in. Once those materials were checked in, there were more fees, and he came in the next day. And I was a supervisor at the time, and just, I don't think I'd ever been berated like that before. So just not having our staff have to go through that is one thing, but we're not focusing on, especially telling children that they can't check out because they have overdue fees. That I work in the downtown library, and it's we have a lot of people who are unhoused. It's kind of where our section of the city that just isn't as affluent, and we do have a lot of students that do come in, and it was always hard having those conversations with students saying that they had too many fines on their account so that they couldn't check out. So I would say that in terms of like offering a fresh start waiver has been helpful for our frontline staff, even if somebody really isn't eligible for it. Sometimes we just say to staff, we'll go ahead and have them fill it out. It kind of de-escalates the anger that might be associated with having fees on an account, and it gives the customer a time to kind of calm down. We don't, those fresh start waivers have to be approved by branch managers. So we always tell the customer that it's, you'll hear back within, 2 or 3 weeks. And it really helps our frontline staff so that they don't have to go through those really negative conversations with customers.
Thank you. That's awesome.
All right. That's all we got from the Q&A, Josh, if you want to take us home.
Yeah, I'll turn it back over to Nicole at this point.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Thank you, Josh, Katie, and Kevin, for all of the helpful information that you were able to give us today. This has been the first in a series of sessions that we're calling the Patron Access Webinar Series. We're trying to do these on a more regular basis, and our next webinar is going to be on July 22nd. And the topic for that webinar is going to be automated borrower registration product, which allows our patrons to sign up online. They have their identity verified, their ILS patron record created, and then their barcode number is issued within moments. Kevin will share a link to that so that you can sign up for that, and we'll be communicating with you via email as that date approaches, as it gets a little bit nearer. Also, as a reminder that our previous webinar, Inclusive by Design, is available on our YouTube channel, along with a full library of our past seminars, and Kevin will also share a link for that as well. If you'd like to learn more about our gentle nudge or any of our solutions that we've discussed today, feel free to contact us. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.